Well, hello guys. Like I told you before, I was going to create some videos to cover some of the things that we have been doing. Mainly, what we're going to do right now is to cover the basics of Construct 2 and to give you the chance to go back to these videos and do what we were doing in the workshop. So, well, let's start. Also, remember that here you always have kind of like my information. You can check my blog and where I have many videos that are going to help you. And well, also contact me if you have any questions and well, let me know how everything's going. Like I said before, we're going to try to document everything that we're doing in the different sessions. So this is basically the game that we had at the end of the first session. And if you remember, it's quite simple, but there are many things that are basic and that are really important to remember and to, well, use for the following games. So I'm going to try to recreate this. Perhaps I'm going to leave this one open here to just remember and try to cover everything that we have here and see how it goes. So here I'm going to try to create a new project. I'm going to say a new empty project. And if you remember here, one of the concepts that we had was about the layout. So here on the layout is this white empty canvas that we are going to use to put all the graphic elements of our game. Now, the dotted line that we see here is basically what it's going to appear on the screen. So that means that in this case we're going to have a level, a scenario that is much bigger than what is going to appear on the screen. And that means that elements can go out. But we can change it, we can leave it like that. So at the moment I'm just going to leave it like that. Then I'm going to start adding elements. The first one that we're going to add is a sprite. So I'm going to double click, can be anywhere in the layout, and I'm going to pick a sprite. Again, as a reminder, if you don't find something, looking through the list, it has many elements, then you can go here to the search box and start typing. So, Sprite. And you're going to have quite likely what you're looking for. So, what I did last time was to just create a small character, so I'm going to make him blue, and it was kind of like a stickman. So it's not exactly the greatest animation or the greatest element ever, but it kind of works for what we're doing. So I'm going to put it here, and that's kind of it. We can close it, and we have our little sprite. Now the first thing is that if you look, if this is the screen, this is going to be a really big character. So I'm going to try to show you how big it is. So if this is the screen, it'll be really big. So I'm just going to change the size, and for that I can use the corner or basically all the helps that we have here, the hot points that we have here. I'm going to make him perhaps something like this. It doesn't really matter. Now, the second thing that perhaps you should remember is that when you press the run layout button, then it's going to open a new tab in your browser, and you're going to be able to see what you have so far. So there we go. So far we have our sprite, and it's not doing really much because we haven't really added any behavior. So to be able to add behaviors, you have to pick an element, and then here on the left side on this pane you are going to see properties. If at some point you lose it, if you don't see the properties when you have here, you just have to go to view, and here you have the properties bar. So then click on that, and this pane should appear here. So you have your bar here. Now inside the properties, almost in the middle, you have behaviors. So I'm going to click on that. I have an empty list. I don't have any behaviors added at the moment. And then I'm going to click add new. In this case, what I want is this one to behave like a platform or a platformer. So I'm going to close it and we're going to run it again. And we see that now we have gravity. The next step was to add the platforms where I'm actually standing. So I'm going to add another sprite. So double click again, sprite, to put one here. I'm going to make them almost black so they are quite different from the color of our character. Sorry, there. And again, I'm going to change the shape and adjust it to whatever I want. So, okay, that's it. Now we need a behavior for this one. If I run it right now, we just have a sprite that is just an image, so it's not doing much. So we have to add a behavior. Again, on the properties, list, add new, and then solid. And if I run it, I'm able to stand on top of that platform. Now, the other cool thing that we have to, or that we can do here, is to copy things. So this one, most people are thinking about Control-C, Control-V, and that works for many things in the computers, but in this case, they needed to come up with something different. So they just made this combination that is press the key Control key, and while you are still pressing, then you drag with your mouse, and then you can make as many copies as you want. So the cool thing about this is that you don't have many different platforms, you just have many copies of one platform, and all of them already have the solid behavior. So if I run this, I should be able to move between them. Okay. So to this point, we're doing okay. But now if you notice, whenever I get out of the screen, whenever I move my character, it's just falling because, well, there is no platform that is going to prevent him from falling. And on top of that, if I go out, let's say we have here our little screen here. If I go to a platform that does not appear inside of the screen, I cannot see my character. So I'm going to show you. So I go here, and then I know that there's a platform that is here on the right. That I go out of the screen and I should be able to get here, and I'm not able to see that. So how do we solve that? Then we have to add another behavior to our character. That behavior, again, now we have one behavior here, so it appears on the list, is going to be called scroll to. That basically is saying it doesn't really matter where in the screen my character is, as long as is inside of the layout, I'm going to follow him or her with my camera. So let's try that. And you begin to see that everything moves. At this point is when you notice that having a bigger layout kind of like makes sense, because then we can do several things with a bigger scenario, not just a small piece there. Still, we have the problem that is like what happens if I fall out of the layout. So there are several ways that we can solve that. There's a behavior that fixes that, but the simplest one that we can do is just like to make a copy of the floor and just put it at the bottom, right? I can even do that with all the borders of my screen. So with that, I can make certain that it's not going out of my layout. So also, this is a great moment to see this. What happens with this one, if I take another copy here, I could change the shape of this one and try to make it a little bit more vertical. But what I'm going to do is just to show how you can change the angle. So I can pick here and go again to the properties on the left side, and we see that the angle is 0. So I can just put it to 90 and already has the orientation that I want. And I make a copy of this one. So there you go. Now it's not going to be able to fall out of the screen regardless if I'm on the platforms or not. So, and I should be able to get to a border, and that's the end of my scenario. Now, what else can we do? In the first session, we added some enemies. Before that, I would like to make a small tip, to give a small tip that is quite good to keep in mind. Right now, every single time that we add a sprite, it's going to give us a default name that is Sprite, Sprite 2. And at some point, it would be good to actually have names to differentiate things. If we have many things that are just blocks, if we don't change the color, it could be a little confusing. So again, you can put, select one of your elements and go on the left side and name them. So in this case, I'm going to rename this one as, hero. That's my hero. And you can see that it changes here. And this one, I'm going to say just like, block. That's it. So it's a block where I'm standing, or it could be named wall or platform. I don't know. It could be named whatever you want. Just with that, I know what I'm talking about. So now we're going to add some enemies. So in this case, I'm going to do, again, a small sprite. And I'm going to do it first manually, how we had it before, and then I'm going to add an enemy that is from, from an image that was taken from the internet. Just remember that you have to take images that you have permission to take, okay? In this case, I'm going to make a red enemy over here, and then I'm going to try to draw an angry face. Okay, so that's the enemy that I could use. Okay, so it's not so bad. Now, just like that, we're just going to have a block. It's not going to do really much. So the thing that we did was to make it move basically back and forward. So it was doing this behavior. So how do I do that? There are many ways, but I'm just going to do one that I know by heart, and in this case is to use the bullet behavior. So the bullet behavior is just going to make an element, a sprite, an object, to move in a straight line. So you see this angle here, this little line in the center of the enemy. That line kind of like indicates that its angle is 0, and it's going to move along that line. So what I'm going to add first is the behavior. So we already know how to do that. And the bullet one is here. So if I run it right now, we just have an enemy that goes away. Now what I need to do is to somehow detect a limit and say, for example, I want my enemy to go just until here, and then make it go back and forward. So to do that, I'm going to use a small add on here. I'm going to add another sprite. And this one I'm going to make a green, whatever, green. Doesn't really matter, because we want them to be really small. Something like this. And then I'm going to put another one back here. Just copy. So what are these things that I'm going to even rename everything else? So I'm going to say enemy. This one is called enemy. And this one is going to call limit. So what these two green squares, what they are doing is just to help me detect when my enemy gets to this position and then change the direction to move it the other way. So how do I do that? That's when we start adding some logic to our game. So we had two tabs here. We have been working on layout 1, but the logic goes here on the event sheet. So I'm going to go there. Here I have add event. Now, the events have two parts. The left part is always the where or the when. When something happens, then I do some sort of actions. So that's the other part, the right part, the action. So I'm going to say when my enemy touches the limit, what do I do? What is the do? What are the actions? Or in this case, action. I'm going to change the direction of movement and go back. So let's start writing the when. I pick the enemy. In this case, it's called collision. And collision with another object. So when they collide, when they touch. And on click to choose, I'm going to pick the limit, and what we have here in this event is a question that says when the enemy has a collision with the limit, do something. And in this case, I have to start adding actions. So what is the action? I already said it. I have to change the direction of the enemy, of the movement. So I'm going to say enemy. We use the bullet to move him around, so I'm going to say angle of motion. And I'm going to do it wrong, but it's just to illustrate what I need. 180. So if this angle is 0, 180 be this. So that's basically what it's going to do. It's going to move all the way here, and then it's going to say I want to change in this way, and then it's going to start moving this way. So let's try it. It touches, it changes, and it keeps going. So what happens? Why is it not changing the direction on this other limit? It should also like go back here. Well, the thing is that we say just change it to 180. So I'm going to kind of like do it manually. It comes here, it's moving, it's moving, it's moving. Then it detects that there's a collision between these two elements. So that means that this event is going to be triggered. And it says change the direction to 180. So it changes to 180. Now it starts moving in this direction, and then it detects again. And it says like, hey, I have another collision. Change it again to 180, but I was already in 180. So it doesn't do anything and just keeps going. So that means that the solution that I have right there is not correct. I just don't want to change it to 180. I want to add 180 degrees to my current angle. That means that if I'm at 0, here it's going to change to 180, and when I get here, it's going to change to 360, that is basically the same as 0, and then it goes back and forward. So let's do that. We're going to change this action. To edit an action, you just have to double click, and then we can edit the value that we have here. Now what I want is to change the direction of the enemy. To do that, I'm just going to type here, to say space, I'm going to say enemy. And now you can see that we have in the list, well, enemy, so you can pick it. That way you also make certain that you're picking the right thing. Now you say dot, period, and you have several options here. The most, let's say the common thing that you would think is that I'm just going to change the angle. But really by experience I know that that's not really the one that we want. We want to change bullet behavior, because it's really the angle of movement of the bullet behavior that I'm changing. Now I want to say dot, angle of motion. So now this is my current angle. So at the beginning it's 0. When I detect the collision, when this event acts, I want to add 180. So this is really what I want. So instead of just putting 180, I'm going to say I'm going to take the current angle of motion, and then I'm going to add 180. So if you have problems watching that on the video, I'm going to make it a little bigger. Let me see. So this is kind of like a bigger version of what I just wrote, and this is what we need. So the enemy, bullet, angle of motion, plus 180. So now let's go and test it. So this is what I have, and see if I was correct or not. You see? Of course, it's working up to a point. It's going back and forward, but there are two things that I would like to change. First, perhaps the player shouldn't see the limits. The player shouldn't see these green squares here. And you can see that when it's coming back, it turns the face up and down, and that's not the behavior that I want. So let's just start with that one. I'm going to click on the enemy, and here we had behaviors and just behaviors. Now, since we added bullet, we have the opportunity to change the values that we have with the bullet. And this one, the one that we're going to change is set angle. And by default it says yes. So I'm going to say no. And now let's try it. So here, properties, behaviors, bullet, set angle, no. Let's run it. Then it works. So basically what it's saying is like, hey, the angle of motion now, because it's not set, it's not going to be the same as the angle of my image, which is perfect. It's exactly what I want. Now, how can I change the fact that the squares are visible? I want them to be visible here in the editor, so I can move them around. So it's good that they are green. You could make them white, but then you're not going to be able to find them. So I just need the player to do not see them. So to do that, I just select them here, the limit. And at the bottom, almost at the bottom of the properties, you have this one that says initial visibility, visible. I'm just going to say invisible. And now let's try it. So you see that now your enemy is going back and forward, and I'm not able to see those limits, and well, that's what I want. So what happens with this? That it works so well, or it should, that if I make several copies of the enemies and the limits, they still should work. So let's see something like this. Let's see if that works. And of course, for each one of them, I can change the limits and make them a little bit different. So let's see if that works. So you see, we have several enemies, and each one of them has a different limit, and I can modify those limits. So that's really cool. So we're kind of like making a lot of progress here. The last thing that I was asked, if I'm not mistaken, in the first session was that how do I make like a small animation? How do I change this little character and make him like look that he's walking or something like that? So I'm going to do kind of like the basics for animation. This is nothing really complex, and of course you have to do many small things here and there to make them look nice, but still it kind of works. So I'm going to double click on my character, and I'm going to call your attention for something that quite likely was kind of hidden, and it has to do with this. You have a small pane here with animations, and you just have one that is default. And on the animations you also have frames. So if you think about it, we already went through this. Animation, or yeah, like a movie, is just a collection, a set of frames that move really fast. So to make it really simple here, I'm going to duplicate this one, this frame. I'm going to say right click, duplicate, and then again right click, duplicate, and then I'm going to change this. So I'm just going to change his arms. That's what I did last time. So in this case, I'm going to delete the arms. And because it's even faster, I'm just going to delete this one and duplicate this one that already doesn't have arms, and then I can change the position. This is one of the tools that you have here in the editor, that is to pick a color, so color picker. So I had another color and I want this blue, so I just pick it and pick it, and then I get that color. That way I can get the right color to make the arms. So in the first position I had arms extended like this, so now I'm going to perhaps move them up, and then okay, so that one was not exactly the one that I wanted, but well, I can make it right. So I'm going to do it like this, and this one I'm also going to duplicate and move it correctly. So basically, if you see the animation here, he's going to put his arms down, then they're going to back to the middle and then up, and then to make it replicate, they are going to again go down. So how do I make it work like this? If I just close it here and run, then he's just going to do it one time, and then his arms get stuck here. So the other thing that I can do is just to go back here, to pick my animation, move this down because I think this one is kind of like up. Okay, it's not exactly what I wanted, but this my color palette was kind of like covering what I really wanted. So let me move them around, and this is what I want. Pick the animation here on the animation bar, and it says loop. No, I want to change it to yes. That means that these frames are going to repeat over and over and over and over. The other thing that I can change is the speed. So that means that you're going to be able to fix how fast his arms are going to be moving up and down. So I'm going to run it. And now you see that we have kind of like the basics of an animation, and it doesn't really matter where I go. I'm still moving my arms up and down. Of course, a better animation would have been for me to detect when I'm moving and then move the legs, but that's something that we're going to do in another video. So let me check if that's what we had in our original project. So this is the one that we had. And that's kind of like similar to what we had. So I think I added some limits here. So that's something that we didn't do in our original project, so I added something more. The other thing is that in this one I made the scenario much bigger. So how to change that? You can just go here to new project. Well, no, it wasn't the layout, I'm sorry. And then you can change the layout size. So I can do that on my other project. So I'm going to go here to layout, and then I'm going to make this one this big. So after changing that, our scenario should be much bigger. The only thing is that, of course, I put like limits over here, but well, I can move them around and also fit that. I think at the moment that would be kind of like what we did in the first session. I'm going to leave it here, and then I'm going to record another video that is going to cover what we saw on the second session. Well, that's it for the first video. Here you have again my contact information. Quite likely I'm going to send you the link of this project after I finish the second video with the second session that we had. And well, let me know also if you're liking it or any other ideas of the things that you are doing. So well, thank you.